So last week we talked about President Joe Biden's declining approval rating, and it's been a significant decline. As of last week, Joe Biden's approval rating was down about 16%. Now that's 16%, not 16 points, from about 55 to 46. My sense last week was that Joe Biden's approval rating would probably continue down before it might recover, depending on what happens. But my sense was we hadn't yet seen the bottom. The reason that I thought that was that the full scope of the Afghanistan situation wasn't yet in last week's polling. And what I mean by that is that the polling we looked at early last week was taken mostly before the suicide attack by ISIS at Kabul airport in Afghanistan. And in fact, I pointed out last week that Joe Biden's approval decline actually started in July before any of the Afghanistan situation got going. But certainly the Afghanistan situation was not helping, and that we would probably see a further decline. Indeed, in the last week, Joe Biden's approval has, exactly as expected, continued to decline. Not dramatically more than last week, but the downward trajectory is clear, and he's now down to just a hair over 45% approval. We care more about the average of polls than about any individual poll. We want to look at sort of the general direction. But there are now some individual polls showing Joe Biden at only 42% and 44% approval. And there may be even more of a decline. So what are the important notes here? Why is this happening? What are we looking for? What do we expect? Two of the major drags on Joe Biden's approval right now are COVID resurgence with Delta, for which really Republican governors and anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers are to blame more than Joe Biden's policy. Biden's policy has been get people vaccinated, keep schools safe. But I don't deny that ultimately the buck stops with Biden, and he has said that. So that's one drag, which at a sort of nitty gritty level is actually the fault of mostly Republicans. The second drag is Afghanistan. So if COVID improves by November of 2022 for the midterms, I believe people will have forgotten about Afghanistan. In general, foreign policy impacts voting less than domestic policy, and Biden himself is not actually on the ballot. You can see November of 22 as a sort of referendum on Joe Biden for sure. But this may not really be the end of the world for Joe Biden and Democrats in November of 22. Now, for comparison to prior presidents, Joe Biden's approval today is still 7 points higher than Trump's at this point in their presidencies, but below both where Barack Obama was at this point in his presidency and below where George W. Bush's approval was at this point in his presidency. So what does it mean? What's next? Really, there's no change from what we outlined last week. On Afghanistan, execution aside, Joe Biden got us out of a war that we needed to get out of. That's good. That's the big story. The big story is Bush got us into Afghanistan. Obama didn't get us out. Trump didn't get us out. Biden got us out. Were there execution mistakes? Of course. And we've talked about it. There's no doubt about that. But I don't believe that the big narrative, which is Biden got us out and it didn't go perfectly, is going to impact 2022. The tough part comes where Biden now really needs a big success. But the lower his approval rating, the less likely that Republicans are going to be incentivized to work with him unless he makes some gigantic compromises, for example, on infrastructure, which might turn Biden's victory into a Pyrrhic one, a Pyrrhic victory, one in which you sustain so much damage in getting the victory that in practice, it's a question as to whether really it's a victory. So it's this vicious circle. Biden needs a big accomplishment to buoy his approval rating. But having a lower approval rating reduces the pressure on Republicans to actually work with Joe Biden because his approval rating is already lower. And the expectations from the American public that Republicans work with him may also be diminished. Joe Biden is expected to address the nation tomorrow, Thursday, about COVID. There's a question as to whether he will be announcing new guidelines, new restrictions, mandates, whatever the case may be. We will see what kind of an audience that gets. We will see if it does anything for his approval. And I don't know what time that is tomorrow, but my intention is to cover it live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. So I hope you will join me. It's been already kind of previewed by the Biden administration that there is not going to be an announcement of a federal vaccine mandate tomorrow. There was some theorizing, and theorizing is even probably too generous a term. There was some speculation by some on the right that tomorrow is the day that Biden announces a vaccine mandate. And that's it for many of them. What that means, I don't know. It sounds violent, but okay. But the administration has already said that is not the plan. In so many words that this is not their wording, this is mine. But it was made clear that Joe Biden is not announcing a vaccine mandate tomorrow, but he will be announcing something, and we'll see what that does, and we'll continue to track his approval rating. One of our sponsors is Privacy.com. They're giving you $5 when you sign up for their completely free service at Privacy.com/Pacman. I've been using Privacy for a little over a year now. You've heard me talk about it before. It's a lifesaver, and here's how it works. It takes just a couple of minutes to set up. Anytime you buy something online or on the phone, instead of actually using your real credit card number, the Privacy app and the browser plugin let you give each company a randomized virtual credit card number that you create out of thin air. It'll even autofill the card number with one click. And the payment is taken out of your checking account without the merchant ever knowing your real information. So this allows you to keep your banking information secure, but also to take control of your finances. You can create up to 12 of these virtual credit cards a month. You can set spending limits. You can freeze them. You can delete them anytime you want. So when you do this, it means you're not going to be charged when you don't want to be, because you can destroy the virtual card number right after using it, which, for instance, I love using free trials because I know I won't be charged when the trial is over if I use a virtual credit card number. You're keeping your identity private by not telling companies who you are. You're keeping your bank or credit card info protected against data breaches and identity theft. And it's free. And like I said, you'll get $5 to spend when you sign up at Privacy.com/Pacman.